By the time the Navy found Daniel Cole again, he had been missing on purpose for almost 7 years. They discovered him under the overpass by the freight yards, where the concrete trembled every time a train screamed past. His bed was a rectangle of cardboard and a donated sleeping bag, tucked neatly behind a pillow the color of old chewing gum. On good nights, the smell was only diesel and dust. On bad nights, it was wet socks, rot, and the sour tang of spilled beer. He was drinking coffee out of a chipped plastic mug when the volunteer in the navy blue hoodie recognized him. "Yo, you Cole," the young man said, hovering with a styrofoam plate of scrambled eggs. His hoodie read Harbor Hope Outreach in block letters. "Sometimes," Daniel replied, not looking up. He had the lean, roped build of a man who'd once been very fit and now lived on too little food and too much walking. His hair had gone mostly gray at the temples, his beard rough and uneven. The only thing about him that still looked like the officer he used to be were his eyes, a clear, unsettling gray-blue that seemed to measure distance, angles, threats. "I watched the hearing," the volunteer said quietly, as if he were confessing something. "The one on TV. The Gulf incident." Daniel's fingers tightened on the mug. The coffee surface shook a little. "That's so," he said. "You were captain of the Hawthorne, right?" "Commanding officer," Daniel corrected automatically, then cursed himself for letting the words out. "Was. I'm sorry," the volunteer said. He looked young enough to have been in middle school during the war. "My name's Liam." "Thanks for the eggs, Liam." Daniel shifted, signaling the conversation was over. Most people took the hint and moved on. Pity was a currency he refused. But Liam lingered. "They're doing some kind of, I don't know, like a PR thing at the base. Full Fleet Week. Day with a destroyer. They're inviting vets. Let you walk around, see everything again." I thought, "No, it might be good," Liam tried, "to be back on a ship." Daniel looked up at him finally. "Son, the last ship I was on blew half its guts into the sea. I think I've had my tour." He expected Liam to blanch and retreat. Instead, the kid swallowed and nodded as if that was fair. "Okay, if you change your mind, we're taking a group from the shelter. I can put your name down. No pressure." "There's always pressure," Daniel muttered, but Liam was already stepping away to offer eggs to the next man in line. The paper flyer he slipped beside Daniel's coffee mug was creased and cheaply printed. The Navy crest, a gray silhouette of a destroyer cutting across stylized waves, and a slogan in bold, "A day back at sea, honoring our heroes." Underneath it, smaller text, "Special recognition for decorated veterans. Share your story. Let us recognize your service." Daniel crumpled the flyer in his fist without reading the rest. Decorated. Once upon a time he'd been that, too. 2 days later, he fished the same flyer out of the trash barrel, smoothed it against his knee, and read every word. He told himself it was because the shelter had run out of books, and not because the word destroyer still made some hollow part of his chest ache. The first person to bring the idea to the Navy had not been Liam. It had been a captain with immaculate ribbons and a panic in her inbox. "We need a story," said Captain Aisha Mukherjee, standing in a conference room at Pacific Fleet Public Affairs. "Something that plays. We've got 3 separate stories out this week on homelessness among vets, and every one of them has a picture of someone sleeping in a jacket with Navy on the back. We need a counter-image. Redemption. Support. Hope. All the stuff in the PowerPoints." On the wall behind her, a projector displayed the words Fleet Week 2026, key messaging. Her audience, 3 public affairs officers scrolling on their tablets, a civilian media strategist with cufflinks shaped like anchors, and someone from the Admiral's office watching from a dark rectangle on video call. "We're partnering with Harbor Hope," the strategist said. "They can bring us veterans who are housing insecure." He pronounced it like a foreign word. "We get them a day on a ship. Show them the resources, the counselors, maybe 1 or 2 powerful personal stories. Remind people we don't abandon our own." Mukherjee kept her face still. "We do abandon our own," she said, at least in her head. Out loud, she said, "So we're talking about an embedded media day on a destroyer. Who's the CO? Reagan, if they sign off," the strategist said. "Nice visuals, Aegis, slick bridge." We can do an honorary captain thing. Let a vet sit the chair for some B-roll. Human interest. Tase. He went from the streets to the bridge. That sort of angle. One of the younger lieutenants in public affairs cleared his throat. There might be some ethical concerns about letting. It'll all be controlled, the strategist cut in. Commando on each shoulder. Nothing real, just on camera. The dark rectangle from the Admiral's office spoke for the first time. It stays safe and it stays scripted, he said. We are not gambling with a warship for a photo op. Yes, sir, Mukherjee said. Do you have any names from Harbor Hope yet? Asked one of the officers. The strategist flicked through his tablet. They sent over a preliminary list of vets interested in attending. I haven't vetted it yet. He laughed at his own pun. No one else did. Let's see, we've got. He stopped, squinted. Mukherjee, are you familiar with a Daniel J. Cole? The air in the room shifted, barely, like a pressure drop before a storm. One of the lieutenants looked up, surprised. Another stayed blankly, too young to recognize the name. Mukherjee kept her eyes fixed on the projected bullet points. I know who he is, she said. What about him? He's on this list. The strategist frowned. Says, former CEO, DDG 112 Hawthorne. Bronze star with V. That the same guy? Yes, she said. The syllable tasted like rust. The one from that incident. The hearing, the lieutenant asked, curiosity overtaking his caution. That incident was a decade ago. The Admiral's disembodied voice said sharply. This is not the forum. Forgive me, Admiral, the strategist said. But given the coverage, that could actually make this bigger. Disgraced captain finds redemption. People love a comeback story. People also love relitigating our worst days, Mukherjee said. The Hawthorne case was ugly. Legal, political, international. I doubt anyone wants that dragged back into the news cycle. There was a pause on the line, a crackle of distant office air conditioning. Has his discharge ever been formally overturned? The Admiral asked. No, sir, Mukherjee said. As far as I'm aware, he's still carrying a general under honorable conditions. Reduced rank. Loss of pension. She inhaled. Unofficially, half the officers I know think he got railroaded. Unofficially doesn't exist, said the Admiral. Officially, he disobeyed direct orders in theater and people died. Mukherjee's jaw flexed. Officially, yes, sir. The strategist leaned back in his chair. Be that as it may, I see opportunity. We spin this as the Navy not giving up on even its most complicated veterans. We bring him on board. We control the narrative. You want to put Daniel Cole in a captain's chair again? Mukherjee said. On camera. Only in a ceremonial sense, he said. Optics. You said themselves we need a story. This is a story. Silence. On the far screen, the Admiral rubbed his forehead as if a migraine had just knocked. If we do this, he said carefully, we do it with guardrails thicker than the hull. A watchstander on every console, CO next to him at all times. Nothing real at stake. And Public Affairs writes every word before it's said. Yes, sir, Mukherjee said. And if anything, starts to smell like the Hawthorne Board of Inquiry again, we cut it off and I want Cole off that ship so fast he leaves a contrail. Understood. Yes, sir, came the chorus. Fine, the Admiral said. You want your redemption narrative. You've got it. But remember, this is your show, Captain Mukherjee. If it blows up in your office first. The video rectangle winked out. No one spoke for a moment. The room hummed with air vents and the distant thud of helicopter rotors from the base. Okay, the strategist said, rubbing his hands together. Let's bring our man in from the cold. Mukherjee stayed at the names on the tablet, at the line that said, Daniel J. Cole, age 48, USN, Ret, formerly commander. In her memory, he was still standing in a witness box in dress whites, shoulders refusing to slump even as 13 pairs of eyes weighed his career and found it expendable. I'll handle the contact, she said. They found him because, in the end, Daniel let them. The first time Liam tried to sign him up, Daniel threatened to pour his coffee on the kid's shoes. The second time, he just said, no, thanks. The third time, Liam said, "Look, they're offering a small stipend. You could get a decent coat out of it. Maybe a room for a week." "Not interested in being anyone's pity project," Daniel snapped. Liam shrugged and knelt to tie his shoe. "They're not calling it pity," he said. "They're calling it honoring service. But they are looking for someone who used to be a CEO. They said it'd be nice for the cameras. You'd just be doing what you used to do." "Except I don't do that anymore," Daniel said. Liam glanced up. "You know they still talk about you, right? On the forums, blogs, all that. Some of them think you got screwed." He hesitated. "Some of them think you were the only one that did the right thing." Daniel's heartbeat stuttered. He stared at the graffiti on the opposite pillar, lead tags and a half-finished cartoon octopus. "Forums don't pay pensions," he said. "No," Liam said. "But this could get you noticed. A story about you might push someone to reopen your case." Daniel laughed, harsh and humorless. "The Navy doesn't reopen cases. It buries them at sea." "Maybe," Liam said. "But if you do nothing, then nothing changes." He handed Daniel a folded piece of paper. "They asked me to give you this. From someone in public affairs, I think. She said she knew you." Daniel almost dropped the paper. No one from that world knew him anymore. They knew his file. He unfolded it. "Commander Cole, your name came up when Harbor Hope reached out about Fleet Week. If you're willing, we'd like to invite you to join a small group of veterans on board USS Reagan for a day at sea. This is not about reopening old wounds. It's about honoring your years of service. All of them, not just the last one you were judged on. I will be there to meet you personally. There is a modest stipend for your time, and more importantly, there will be representatives from Veterans Affairs and several housing programs on board. I hope you'll consider it. Respectfully, Captain Aisha Mukherjee, Director, Public Affairs, Pacific Fleet." Daniel stayed at the signature for a long time. He remembered a young lieutenant, years ago, who'd helped coordinate a press event on the Hawthorne's pier. Sharp, precise, always with a notebook in hand. He remembered her expression in the gallery during his hearing, rigid, angry, eyes dark with something that looked a lot like guilt. "You know her?" Liam asked. "I knew her," Daniel said. "You gonna go?" The trains thundered overhead. The overpass shook dust onto his shoulders. Daniel thought about how, in winter, the cold got into his bones so deep he woke up in the night shaking and didn't know if it was from the temperature or the memory of alarms and impact. "I'll think about it," he said. That night, he unfolded the letter 3 more times under the dim shelter light. The word that snagged him wasn't honor or service. It was bridge. He dreamed of the bridge that night, of the Hawthorne rolling under his feet, the red glow of battle stations, the chorus of voices, target bearing 085. "Sir, they're not responding. We've got fishing boats in the scatter. Incoming." He woke up on cardboard with his hands clenched into fists and his heart trying to pound its way out of his ribs. In the gray before dawn, Daniel walked to the drop-in center and told Liam he'd go. The destroyer looked smaller than he remembered. From the PU, USS Reagan rose out of the water like a steel blade, all angles and antennas. The air smelled of salt and diesel and the faint tang of paint. Civilians in windbreakers clustered near the brow, flanked by sailors in crisp dress whites guiding them through metal detectors. Daniel stood at the edge of the group from Harbor Hope, wearing the only collared shirt he owned, one Liam had found at a thrift store, and a donated pea coat that almost fit. "Name?" asked the petty officer at the table, checking a list. "Daniel Cole," he said. The petty officer's pen paused for a fraction of a second before continuing. "ID, sir." "Sir." The word felt like someone calling him by a name he'd outgrown. He handed over his worn-out VA card. The petty officer compared it to the list, then looked up with forced neutrality. "Right this way, Mr. Cole," he said. "Captain Mukherjee asked to be notified when you arrived." Daniel swallowed. "Of course she did," he muttered. He stepped onto the brow. The gangway shifted under his feet with the familiar, subtle flex of a ship at berth. The sensation crawled up through his legs like memory. He touched the handrail, palm against cold metal. 11 years ago, he had walked down a similar gangway for the last time with his cover in his hands and a storm of cameras waiting. At the top of the brow, A young officer with a chest full of ribbons stood at attention. "Commander Cole," she said. "Just Mr. Cole now," he replied. She smiled, eyes sharp and assessing. "On this ship, sir, we're going to call you whatever makes you stand up a little straighter. Welcome aboard. I'm Lieutenant Commander Maya Hernandez, Executive Officer." She extended her hand. He shook it. Her grip was firm enough to say she knew who he was and didn't care to be intimidated. "Captain Mukherjee is waiting in the wardroom," Hernandez said. "If you'll follow me." The wardroom was too bright. Stainless steel flashed, coffee urns gleamed, and the long table was flanked by chairs bolted to the deck. Captain Mukherjee stood at the far end, out of uniform. She'd chosen civilian business wear, navy blazer, gray slacks, but there was no mistaking the way she carried herself. "Daniel," she said. "Aisha," he answered. They considered each other across the room. Time had etched finer lines around her eyes, threaded silver through her black hair, but she was still straight as a mast. He wondered what time had written on his own face. He avoided mirrors. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I almost didn't." "I know. You baited the hook with bridge." He couldn't keep the bite out of his voice. "Very clever." She winced, just a little. "We didn't invite you here to manipulate you." "Could have fooled me." She exhaled. "We're doing a Fleet Week media event. The theme is honoring veterans, especially those who've fallen on hard times. We partnered with Harbor Hope. Your name came up." She hesitated. "I asked them not to push you. They gave you my letter anyway." "That kid Liam's very persistent," Daniel said. "He is. I told him to offer, not pressure. If you felt pressured, I'm sorry." He shrugged. "I'm here, aren't I?" "Yes." She glanced at Hernandez. "Would you give us a moment, XO?" "Of course," Hernandez said, and slipped out, closing the hatch behind her. The hum of the ship seemed louder in the quiet that followed. "I know what this looks like," Mukherjee said. "Do you?" Daniel asked. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you want to plaster my face on a brochure that says, 'Look, even the ones we threw away get a day in the sun.'" "That's not it." "You were at my hearing," he said. "You watched them strip my command. Where were you when I was testifying that we had non-combatants in the target area and the strike order was still green?" Her eyes shadowed. "I was a lieutenant with a clipboard," she said. "I was there to make sure the microphones worked. They didn't ask my opinion. You didn't offer it, either." His word came out sharper than he intended. He'd had a decade to rehearse this anger. It still surprised him how easily it surfaced. "I wrote a memo," she said quietly. He blinked. "What?" "Back then, after the incident, I wrote a memo to my chain of command. I said the rules of engagement as written didn't account for the electronic interference in the Gulf, that the situation was ambiguous, that you made the call with the information you had. I said scapegoating you wasn't going to fix a systemic problem." Her mouth curved bitterly. "I think my department head used it as a coaster." "Did you testify?" he pressed. "No," she said. "I wasn't called, and I didn't fight to be. I was young, Daniel. I was scared. I saw what they were doing to you, and I thought if I spoke up, I'd be next in line. That's not an excuse. It's just what happened." He studied her. For a moment, the wardroom blurred. He saw a younger Aisha, mind racing, choosing silence. It did not make his ruin any less real, but it nudged the needle off pure blame. "Why now?" he asked. "Why me?" "Because they were going to do this with someone," she said. "And I thought if anyone deserved one day back in the place he loved, it was you. And because," she stopped, choosing her words, "because the story they want to tell is incomplete. They want simple heroes and simple victims. I thought if you were here, at least one complicated truth would be standing on this deck." Daniel laughed once. "Rough. You haven't changed," he said. "Still talking in press releases." "I have changed," she said. "So have you. Will you let us do this? You won't be on your own. The Reagan CO will be on the bridge the whole time. We're calling you honorary captain for a day, but no one's letting you near the controls without supervision." "Comforting," he said dryly. "There's also a payment." She slid an envelope across the table. "And there will be VA counselors to talk to. Housing people." Job programs. This doesn't have to just be a photo op. He stayed at the envelope without touching it. Will it change the discharge on my DD-214? He asked. No, she said. I don't have that kind of power. Will it bring back Petty Officer Ramirez? The question came out before he could stop it. Her eyes flickered. She'd read the casualty list. He could tell by the way her gaze dropped for a beat, remembering the names as lines on a PDF, not as bodies. No, she said again. Then what's the point? His voice cracked on the last word. She looked at him more gently than he deserved. Maybe there doesn't have to be a point beyond this. For one day, you will stand on a bridge again and remember that before they took your career, they trusted you with $1 billion ship and 300 lives. You weren't a headline. You were a captain. You were good at it. She hesitated. Would it really be so terrible to feel that again? The deck seemed to tilt under him. He'd promised himself, in the long nights under the overpass, that if they ever tried to drag him back into their world, he'd spit in their faces and walk away. Instead, he heard himself say, "What exactly are you asking me to do?" Aisha's shoulders relaxed, just enough. "We'll have media aboard," she said. "You'll do a short interview. Talk about your service, not the hearing. We'll take some footage of you touring the ship, meeting the crew. At one point, during a controlled maneuver, the CO will invite you to sit the chair. Maybe give an order or two under his direction. Left full rudder, steady on course 090, that kind of thing. Symbolic. Safe. And in return, you get the stipend. You get access to every resource we've managed to cram on board. And she paused, if things go well, I'll use whatever political chips I have left to get someone to take another look at your case. No promises, but a look." He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. A look was more than he'd been offered in years. Daniel picked up the envelope. It felt heavy for its size. "Fine," he said. "I'll play along." She nodded. "Thank you." "But Aisha," he added. "Yes. If anyone starts asking about the Hawthorne on camera, I'm not going to lie." Her lips pressed into a line. "I can't ask you to." "You already did," he said. 11 years ago. This time, she flinched. The day at sea dawned clear and bright, with a low swell and a playful wind. It was the kind of weather that made recruiting commercials practically shoot themselves. The harbor was crowded with ships, destroyers, cruisers, a carrier looming like a city block. Tugboats nudged vessels into position. Helicopters clattered overhead. On the pier, brass bands tuned up, visitors queued, and kids in miniature sailor hats clutched tote bags. On the Reagan's Bridge, cameras were being mounted like new sensor arrays. A civilian sound guy in a faded rock band t-shirt taped a microphone under the captain's collar. "Try not to forget we're actually driving a ship in between all the interviews," Hernandez murmured to her CEO. Commander Ian Blake grinned. He was in his early 40s, with the kind of easy charm that made junior officers adore him and superiors forgive his occasional creative interpretation of orders. "I can drive and smile at the same time. XO," he said. "Multitasking is the future." She rolled her eyes. "The future can wait till we're outside the channel." Blake looked over at Daniel, who stood behind them near the aft bulkhead, wearing a borrowed set of khaki shipboard coveralls. Public Affairs had decided a full uniform would be inappropriate. He no longer had the right to the rank, but jeans and a donated coat didn't look right on the bridge either. The compromise made him look like an older chief coming back for a tour. "You good back there, Mr. Cole?" Blake called. "Just watching," Daniel said. "Let us know if we do anything wrong," Blake said cheerfully. "I hear you used to be pretty good at this." Daniel's mouth twitched. "I was adequate," he said. "So, if you were only adequate, half my Jodies should be court-martialed," Hernandez muttered. He smiled despite himself. The ship was already easing away from the PU, tugs shoving against her hull. The harbor spun slowly in the bridge windows. Daniel watched as the familiar choreography unfolded. Lines taken in, harbor pilot giving clip commands, helmsman repeating orders. "Rudder amidships," Blake said. "All ahead 1/3. Rudder amidships, aye." The helmsman's hands moved smoothly over the controls. The low hum of the engines grew. As the destroyer edged into the channel, The civilian camera crew switched on a red tally light. "And we're rolling," said the producer, a woman with a headset and a practiced smile. "Commander Blake, just give us natural. This is your ship, your day." "Don't ever tell him that," Hernandez muttered, but softly enough that only Daniel heard. Blake launched into his spiel like he'd been born doing it. "Welcome aboard USS Reagan," he said. "We're honored to have you with us today as we show what your Navy does every day to keep our seas safe." While he talked, Daniel let the familiar symphony of the bridge wash over him. The murmur of watchstanders reporting bearings and speeds, the faint chatter on the radios, the periodic ding of an alarm acknowledging a change in status. It burrowed under his skin, reawakening neural pathways he'd thought long dead. On the surface, he was calm, hands clasped behind his back. Underneath, his pulse beat with a strange mix of longing and dread. "Mr. Cole," the producer said during a lull, "would like to get a few shots of you looking out over the water, maybe talking with the captain. Nothing too intense. Are you comfortable with that?" Daniel shrugged. "Point the camera where you want. I won't break it." She smiled, perhaps taking his dryness for humor. "Great. Later we'll bring you up to the chair for a ceremonial handover. We'll have you give a simple course order. Our audience loves to hear the real commands." "They are not commands if no one has to obey them," he murmured, but she'd already turned away to fuss with a lens. Aisha arrived on the bridge mid-morning, her presence quiet but unmistakable. She checked in with Hernandez, nodded to Blake, and offered Daniel a brief, searching look. "How are you doing?" she asked. "I remember where everything is," he said. "Muscle memory's unsettling." "Like riding a bike," Blake chimed in. "Except if you mess up a bike, you don't explode," Daniel said. Blake considered that. Fair point. The morning passed in a blur of tours and explanations. Daniel found himself showing a group of younger veterans the CIC, pointing out radar scopes and watchstander stations. "Feels like I'm on the bridge of the Enterprise," one of them joked. "Less legroom, more paperwork," Daniel said. With each explanation, something taut in his shoulders loosened. He knew this world. Electronics changed, crew rotated, but the fundamentals were the same. A ship was still a puzzle of steel and circuits held together by duct tape, coffee, and the stubborn pride of the people who sailed her. At midday, they gathered back on the bridge for the honorary captain segment. The producer's crew clustered near the aft bulkhead, lenses glinting. A small drone hovered outside the windows, capturing exterior shots. "Okay," Blake said. "Let's give the people a show." "Commander," the producer prompted. He straightened, adopting what Daniel recognized as the parade ground's serious voice. "Today, we have the privilege of welcoming back one of our own," he said. "Former Commander Daniel Cole, who commanded the USS Hawthorne with distinction." There was a tiny, almost imperceptible pause before the last words. Daniel wondered if anyone else heard it. "We're inviting him to take the captain's chair again, as a symbol of our respect for all who have served," Blake continued. He turned to Daniel with a theatrical flourish. "Mr. Cole," he said, "would you do us the honor?" For a moment, Daniel's legs refused to move. The chair sat there like an accusation, high-backed, padded, bracketed by consoles. On the Hawthorne, he practically lived in that chair. "Go on," Aisha murmured. "This part was your idea, remember?" He stepped forward and sat today. The cushion felt both familiar and wrong, like slipping on someone else's shoes in your size. The helm station in front of him hummed with lights. The helmsman glanced back, clearly unsure whether to acknowledge this wasn't just another drill. "Helm, this is the captain," Blake said, standing just to the right of the chair. "For this evolution, you'll take orders from Mr. Cole, but only with my confirmation." "Understood." "Aye, sir," the helmsman said. The producer's hand chopped the air. And action. Daniel looked out at the blue shape of the sea ahead. The destroyer was already clear of the channel, moving into open water. "Recommend a simple course change for the cameras," Hernandez murmured. "Nothing fancy." "Come to course 090, Blake suggested. "Eastbound. Nice line with the coastline behind us." Daniel inhaled. "Very well," he said. His voice came out steady, led automatically with command. Helm, he called, projecting the way he used to. Left standard rudder. Steady on course 090. Left standard rudder. Steady on course 090. The helmsman replied. Coming to 090. The ship began to turn, subtle at first, then more pronounced. Daniel felt it through the soles of his feet. The world slewed, the horizon tilting gracefully. New course 085, 087, 089, 090, sir. Very well, Daniel said softly. Steady as she goes. He knew the cameras were on him, but for a few breaths, he forgot them. He was back where he was meant to be, the center of a web of information, every bearing and speed flowing through him like currents. The bridge crew moved with quiet confidence. He could have closed his eyes and still known where everything was. Then someone shouted, "Contact bearing 075, closing, speed high," and the moment shattered. Say again. Hernandez snapped, all professionalism. I've got a fast-moving surface contact. Small. Looks like. The junior officer appeared at the screen. It just popped up. AIS tag is. It's not broadcasting. Range 6,000 yards and closing. The radar screen bloomed with a new blip sliding toward their track. The combat systems operator frowned, fingers flitting over controls. Could be a speedboat, Blake said, his tone tightening. We've got civilian traffic during Fleet Week. Any escort or patrol supposed to be in our path? Negative, sir, said another watchstander. Nothing on the schedule. The producer, sensing something unscripted, gestured for all cameras to keep rolling. Rule out system glitch. Blake asked. Running a diagnostic now, sir, the operator said. But I'm also seeing wake on the EO feed. It's real. A thin thread of unease pulled through the room. Daniel could feel it in the way the air shifted, that almost inaudible change when a ship went from routine to alert. He stood, stepping slightly forward on instinct. The chair behind him was forgotten. Recommend we come starboard. Open CPA, Hernandez said. Agreed, Blake said. Helm. Belay that, Daniel said without thinking. Every head turned. He cleared his throat. Sir, request permission to speak freely as a former CEO. Blake's eyes narrowed. You see something I don't, Mr. Cole. Maybe, Daniel said. He moved closer to the tactical display. The contact's course vector was a narrow dot slanting across their bow. Range, he asked the operator. 5,000 yards and closing. Speed, 35 knots and increasing. Sea state. Daniel asked. 2, sir, Hernandez said. Calm. Then nobody's hobby boat is doing 35 knots straight at a destroyer, he said. At least not on accident. Could be some idiot with more horsepower than sense, Blake said, but his tone had lost its earlier levity. Possible, Daniel said. But in this part of the harbor, with Fleet Week crowds, that's a good way to get turned into fiberglass confetti. He leaned closer. Exo, anything on radio? Hernandez shook her head. Bridge to all stations. Report any contact with small craft approaching on bearing 075, she said into her headset. Nothing yet, came the crackle of replies. So, range 4,000 yards, the operator said. Still closing. No course change. In the back, one of the camera guys whispered, Is this part of the show? It is now, the producer hissed. Keep rolling. Blake stayed at the screen. We're in home waters, he said. Security is tight. Harbor Patrol should have eyes on any vessel behaving like this. Where the hell are they? Maybe they're dealing with 50 other things, Daniel said. His throat felt dry. A decade hadn't dulled the sharp edge of approaching threat. Commander, with respect, I'd recommend sounding 5 short blasts and altering course starboard, not port. Hernandez frowned. Starboard would take us toward deeper water and clearer lanes if they're trying to cross our bow, Daniel cut in. If this is hostile, port gives them a broader contact surface. Starboard narrows it. Blake's jaw ticked. For the first time, he looked less like a man doing a press event and more like a captain weighing risk and responsibility. Helm, he said. Come right, standard rudder. New course 120. Sound danger signal. Right standard rudder, New course 120, I. The ship began to turn again, this time more sharply. Outside, the destroyer's horn bellowed 5 rapid blasts. Maya, get harbor control on the line, Blake said. I want to know if they see this guy. Hernandez was already barking into her headset. Contact bearing 072, range 3,000 yards, the operator said. Still closing. Sir, video feed shows. I'm seeing multiple heat signatures. Could be people on deck. Any flag? Markings? Daniel asked. Negative, sir. Hard to tell at this range. Aisha had moved up from the back of the bridge, her face composed but pale. The cameras hovered nervously, unsure whether to keep filming or get out of the way. Harbor Control reports they are trying to hail the vessel, Hernandez said. No response so far. They've got patrol boats moving but they're, she listened, approximately 5 to 6 minutes out. They're asking our CPA. Current closest point of approach if neither changes course. Blake asked. The operator tapped, frowned. So, at current vectors, CPA is less than 100 yards. Time to CPA approximately 2 minutes. That's too close for comfort, Blake muttered. Recommend we slow to bear steerage way, Hernandez said. Negative, Daniel said instantly. Maya turned on him. Excuse me. If it's hostile, they might be counting on you to lose way, he said. You slow down. They can match speed, keep you pinned. If you keep moving and adjust course, you make their targeting problem harder. He took a breath, forced his voice calmer. You're in home waters, but that doesn't mean you're safe. Think asymmetric. Think small craft as weapons. We've seen this before. The unspoken words hung there. We saw it in the Gulf. You read about it on my charge sheet. Blake drummed his fingers on the rail. What's your recommendation, former Commander Cole? He asked. Daniel didn't have a uniform anymore, but the old instinct clicked into place anyway. Assess, decide, own it. Maintain speed. Come right another 10 degrees, he said. Put their approach angle at our front quarter. Narrow target for them. Maximum maneuver options for us. Prepare to go flank if they alter to match. Hernandez studied him for a heartbeat, then nodded. Once. I concur with the recommendation, sir. Blake nodded. Helm, new course 130. Maintain current speed. 130, same speed. I. Outside, the bow swung further away from the oncoming contact. The blip on the scope shifted, its vector adjusting slightly. Damn, the operator whispered. They're attaining to compensate. New bearing 068. Range 2,000 yards. Still no radio contact. Blake asked. Negative, sir. Aisha spoke up softly. We should consider clearing the non-essential personnel from exposed decks, including the media. The producer opened her mouth to protest, then saw the expression on Blake's face and snapped it shut. Agreed, Blake said. XO, announce restricted movement topside. Get everyone inside now. Mr. Cole, his eyes flicked to Daniel, weighing trust and necessity. I'd like you to stay here. Good, Daniel said. Would have been awkward if I panicked and ran. Not really your style, Blake said. The next 60 seconds stretched thin. The ship's horn sounded again, 5 blasts. On the display, the contact arrow crawled closer. Range 1,500 yards. Visual. Daniel asked. Got them, sir, said the bridge lookout, binoculars glued to his eyes. Small powerboat, maybe 30 feet. Closed cabin, several persons on deck. Looks like. He broke off. So, one of them just stood up with something on his shoulder. Hard to see. Adrenaline flooded Daniel's veins like ice water. His ears filled with phantom echoes. Hawthorne. This is Viper. We've got possible hostile intent. Incoming. Could be a fishing rod, the operator muttered, but no one sounded convinced. Gun mounts. Blake snapped. Mount 2 is manned, sir. But rules of engagement, Hernandez began. The hell with that, Daniel said. If that's a rocket, you don't want to find out the hard way. It's home harbor, Hernandez hissed. We fire on a civilian boat without confirmation, and this fleet week turns into a congressional bloodbath. We need eyes. I've got EO zoom on them, sir. the operator said. Bringing it up now. The screen flickered, then sharpened. The image was grainy but clear enough. A small white boat cutting hard through the water, spray flying. Several figures on deck. One indeed kneeling with something on his shoulder, stock braced, tube pointed. At us, Daniel said. His voice dropped to a flat edge. That's a launcher. Could be a look-alike paintball, started someone. Look at their wake, Daniel snapped. They're driving like they don't care if they flip. No one does that for a prank. Blake's face had gone stone still. Harbor control, he barked. Still trying to hail them, sir, Hernandez relayed. Patrol boats are 3 minutes out. We don't have 3 minutes, Daniel said. They might have 30 seconds. The bridge seemed to hold its breath. Blake looked at Daniel. On the Hawthorne, he said quietly, what did you do? Daniel saw it all again in a flash. The radar blip, the unanswered radio calls, the small craft that kept closing. His refusal to authorize lethal force without clear hostile act. The explosion that ripped through auxiliary power. The bodies. The smoke. The tribunal. I hesitated, Daniel said. I waited for clarity. And people died while I waited. He met Blake's gaze, his own eyes burning. I will live with that forever. Blake's jaw clenched. He turned to the gunner's mate. Mount 2, stand by, he said. I want capable, but I want sure. Back to the operator. Do we have any other confirmation of hostile intent? Radio, intel, anything? Sir, Aisha began. Range 1,000 yards, the operator said. No course change, no speed change. Negative, sir. Aisha spoke up softly. We should consider clearing the non-essential personnel from exposed decks, including the media. The producer opened her mouth to protest, then saw the expression on Blake's face and snapped it shut. Agreed, Blake said. XO, announce restricted movement topside. Get everyone inside now. Mr. Cole, his eyes flicked to Daniel, weighing trust and necessity. I'd like you to stay here. Good, Daniel said. Would have been awkward if I panicked and ran. Not really your style, Blake said. The next 60 seconds stretched thin. The ship's horn sounded again. 5 blasts. On the display, the contact arrow crawled closer. Range 1,500 yards. Visual. Daniel asked. Got them, sir, said the bridge lookout, binoculars glued to his eyes. Small powerboat, maybe 30 feet. Closed cabin, several persons on deck. Looks like. He broke off. So, one of them just stood up with something on his shoulder. Hard to see. Adrenaline flooded Daniel's veins like ice water. His ears filled with phantom echoes. Hawthorne. This is Viper. We've got possible hostile intent. Incoming. Could be a fishing rod, the operator muttered, but no one sounded convinced. Gun mounts. Blake snapped. Mount 2 is manned, sir. But rules of engagement, Hernandez began. The hell with that, Daniel said. If that's a rocket, you don't want to find out the hard way. It's home harbor, Hernandez hissed. We fire on a civilian boat without confirmation, and this fleet week turns into a congressional bloodbath. We need eyes. I've got EO zoom on them, sir, the operator said. Bringing it up now. The screen flickered, then sharpened. The image was grainy but clear enough. A small white boat cutting hard through the water, spray flying. Several figures on deck. One indeed kneeling with something on his shoulder, stock braced, tube pointed. At us, Daniel said. His voice dropped to a flat edge. That's a launcher. Could be a look-alike paintball, started someone. Look at their wake, Daniel snapped. They're driving like they don't care if they flip. No one does that for a prank. Blake's face had gone stone still. Harbor control, he barked. Still trying to hail them, sir, Hernandez relayed. Patrol boats are 3 minutes out. We don't have 3 minutes, Daniel said. They might have 30 seconds. The bridge seemed to hold its breath. Blake looked at Daniel. On the Hawthorne, he said quietly, what did you do? Daniel saw it all again in a flash. The radar blip, the unanswered radio calls, the small craft that kept closing. His refusal to authorize lethal force without clear hostile act. The explosion that ripped through auxiliary power. The The bodies. The smoke. The tribunal. I hesitated, Daniel said. I waited for clarity, and people died while I waited. He met Blake's gaze, his own eyes burning. I will live with that forever. Blake's jaw clenched. He turned to the gunner's mate. Mount 2, stand by, he said. I want capable, but I want sure. Back to the operator. Do we have any other confirmation of hostile intent? Radio, intel, anything? Sir, Aisha began. Range 1,000 yards, the operator said. No course change, no speed change. The guy on the bow, his shouldering it. That's no fishing rod. The image on the screen sharpened for a second. A tubular launcher, the glint of metal. Daniel stepped forward without permission. Commander Blake, he said, voice low and fierce, if you wait for them to fire, it's too late. And if you shoot first and it turns out we're wrong, I will stand in front of every camera on this ship and say I told you to. Let them put it on my head again. But don't let your crew pay for my caution twice. The bridge fell utterly silent. Even the cameras felt like they were holding still. In that suspended instant, everyone saw the two possible headlines branching out in front of them like diverging wakes. Blake inhaled. Gunner's mate, he said, you are authorized to fire a warning burst across their bow. Short, controlled, aim to miss but close. If they maintain course and the launcher stays up, you are cleared to disable that vessel. His eyes flicked to the EO feed. You will avoid lethal shots if possible. I want engines, not buddies. Sir, came the tight reply. XO, log my decision, Blake said. Time, position, ROE considerations, everything. I'll own it. Already recording, Sir, Hernandez said, tapping her tablet. Outside, the drum of the destroyer's forward gun spun up with a chilling mechanical whir. Daniel couldn't see the mount from the bridge, but he felt the vibration through the deck like a distant roar of an angry god. Range 800 yards, the operator called. Target steady. Fire warning burst, Blake ordered. The ship shuddered as a gun barked. The sound slammed into the bridge like a physical shock. On the screen, traces stitched the water just ahead of the oncoming boat, sending up fountains of spray. Contact reaction, Blake demanded. The operator squinted at the feed. I'm maintaining course, sir. Launcher is still up. Goddamn it, Hernandez whispered. Second burst, Blake said grimly. Aim closer. So, range 600 yards, the operator said. At this speed they'll. Gunner's mate, fire to disable, Blake snapped. Target engines. Now. The reply was lost in the thunder as the gun hammered again. This time the contact's bow disappeared in a storm of splashes and flying fiberglass. On the display, the boat jerked violently. Its wake wobbled, then went chaotic. The launcher tilted, fell. Bodies scrambled on deck. They've lost steering, the operator reported. Speed dropping. Range 500, 400. Weapons hold, Blake ordered. All engines ahead full for 3 seconds, then hard right rudder. Let's make damn sure we're clear of any wreckage if that thing's carrying surprises. Flank speed, 3 seconds, hard right rudder. Aye. The destroyer surged. Daniel felt the push of acceleration, the lurch as the bow swung away. Loose items rattled. Someone grabbed a console to steady themselves. Range 300 yards. CPA now increasing, the operator said. The small craft is dead in the water, drifting off our port quarter. Any explosion? Hernandez asked. Negative. No secondary. I see people in the water. Debris. Looks like the engine caught it. Blake let out a breath that sounded like it had scraped his lungs on the way out. All engines stop, he said. Get SAR teams ready. Notify Harbor Patrol we've engaged and disabled a hostile acting vessel. Potential casualties in the water. Medical teams to the rail. The bridge staff sprang into motion, a controlled chaos of orders and acknowledgments. Aisha looked like someone had unplugged her and plugged her back in again. She turned to the camera crew. Shut those off, she said, voice hard. The producer began. This is no longer your show, Aisha snapped. Power them down. Now. Reluctantly, The camera lights went dark. Daniel stood by the forward windows, staring at the smear of white and blue now sliding astern. Tiny figures flailed in the water, too far away to see clearly. He felt hollow, cold. We might have just shot civilians, he heard himself say. We might have just stopped something much worse, Hernandez said. Harbor Patrol confirms they were ignoring calls. If they were harmless pranksters, they picked the wrong damn stage. Blake walked over to Daniel. His face was taut, eyes bright with the kind of shock that doesn't show in tremors, only in the too sharp focus. Did I do the right thing? He asked quietly. Daniel's laugh was more cough. Captain, he said, I'm the last person you should ask that. And yet I'm asking. Daniel looked at the drifting wreckage, then back at the crew moving with disciplined urgency, at the faint smear of smoke where the engine had been. You made a decision fast enough to matter, he said, each word costing something. You chose your crew's lives over the comfort of certainty. That's what command is. It's never clean. Blake stuttered him. What did you do on the Hawthorne? He asked. Not accusing, just curious, when the contact kept coming. I waited, Daniel said. I followed the ROE to the letter. We had no clear hostile act, just intent. I hesitated, and they hit us. And they still blamed you, Blake said. Yes. Blake nodded slowly. Then if they want to blame someone this time, they can blame me. Daniel blinked. Why would you? Because I'm the one in command today, Blake said. You gave advice. I chose to follow it. That's how the chain works. That's how it should have worked for you. Something hot stung behind Daniel's eyes. He swallowed it down. Aisha watched them both, her expression unreadable. The incident did not stay contained. It couldn't. In the age of smartphones and live streams, nothing stayed contained. The drone that had been filming the Fleet Week festivities for the Navy's YouTube channel had captured everything. The small boat's approach, the warning shots, the disabling burst. The feed cut only when Aisha barked to kill the cameras, but by then enough had been uploaded to a server in some cloud that a tech couldn't fully scrub the footage before someone backed it up. Harbor Patrol's body cams recorded the aftermath. Survivors in the water, debris pocked with holes, a battered tube that would later be identified as a modified launcher with a repurposed anti-tank round. Not a toy, not a fishing rod. Within hours, the footage leaked. By that evening, clips were looping on national news with breathless commentary. Today's Fleet Week nearly turned to tragedy. One anchor intoned, as grainy video of the destroyer's warning shots played on a split screen with stock B-roll of previous terrorist attacks. A small craft reportedly ignored repeated warnings and approached the USS Reagan at high speed. Not all the reporters were kind. Some questioned whether the Navy had overreacted in home waters, whether the rules of engagement were too loose, whether the presence of a disgraced former commander advising on the bridge had influenced the decision. Daniel watched one such segment on an old television bolted high in the shelter's common room. The volume tinny, the pictures slightly green. Former Commander Daniel Cole, who was infamously relieved of command a decade ago following a controversial incident in the Persian Gulf, was present on the bridge as an honorary captain for the day, the pundit said. Sources suggest he played a role in advising the chain of command. Are we comfortable with someone whose judgment was once the subject of a court of inquiry being in that position again? A panelist shook his head. This feels like the Navy trying to whitewash a problematic figure by putting him in a feel-good story. Instead, we have live fire in a civilian harbor. Questions must be asked. Liam, sitting next to Daniel, clenched his styrofoam cup so hard it bent. That's not what happened, Liam said. They didn't show the part where. It's fine, Daniel lied. He couldn't tear his eyes from the screen. The footage cycled, again and again. His own face flashed for a second in a still, standing behind the captain, eyes narrowed. They are making you the bad guy again, Liam said. How is that fine? It's what I'm good at, Daniel said. The bitterness in his voice startled even him. The shelter director appeared in the doorway. Mr. Cole, there's someone asking for you. Tell them I'm not interested in any more PR, Daniel said, not looking away from the TV. They said they are from the Inspector General's office, the director said, and they're with Captain Mukherjee. Daniel turned. Two people stood in the hall behind the director. One was Aisha, still in her blazer, dark circles under her eyes. The other was a man in a suit with a badge clipped to his pocket, Office of Naval Inspector General. Daniel's chest tightened. "Now what?" he muttered. "Can we talk?" Aisha asked. "You've had your photo op, Captain," Daniel said. "What's left to take?" "The narrative," the man in the suit said dryly. "Or possibly to fix." He stepped forward, extending a hand. "Mr. Cole, I'm Commander Rahul Singh, JAG, attached to the IG's office." Daniel stayed at the hand, then shook it warily. "This is not an interrogation," Singh said. "Quite the opposite. Would like to hear your side. Officially this time." "My side of what?" Daniel asked. "Of the Gulf incident," Singh said, "and of what happened yesterday. The two are connected in ways that have become politically inconvenient to ignore." Daniel laughed, a short bark. "It's been inconvenient to me for a long time." "I understand," Singh said. "That may be about to change." Aisha stepped in. "The footage from yesterday made its way to a few senators who have already been critical of our IOE policies," she said. "They see a pattern. Ambiguous threats. Commanders caught between legal exposure and crew safety. They are asking questions about whether the Hawthorne case set a precedent that contributed to this. And in the process," Singh added, "your name is back on people's desks. Some of them are not entirely comfortable with what they are finding in the old files." Daniel frowned. "What are they finding?" Singh looked around the common room. A TV blared in the background. Someone argued over a card game. It did not feel like the place for a life-altering conversation. "Is there somewhere more private we can talk?" he asked. "I've got nothing to hide," Daniel said. But he nodded toward a quieter corner anyway. They took seats at a battered table. Liam hovered awkwardly until Daniel jerked his chin toward a chair. "You might as well sit," he said. "You're not going to keep this secret from the rest of them anyway." Liam sat, eyes wide. "Start talking," Daniel said to Singh. "I've got a line for soup in half an hour." Singh folded his hands. "When the Hawthorne incident occurred," he said, "the investigation was hurried. There was intense pressure from above to demonstrate accountability. We were in a difficult phase of the conflict, public opinion was fragile, and Congress wanted a scalp. You were that scalp." Daniel snorted. "Tell me something I don't know." "I intend to," Singh said. "In the process of reviewing your file, I requested access to some communications that were classified at the time. Internal emails, secure messages, that sort of thing. A few of them are illuminating." Aisha watched Daniel closely, as if braced for something breaking. "One memo in particular," Singh went on, "from a senior staff officer to the deputy CNO, written before your board convened. It explicitly states that, quote, regardless of the nuanced IOE considerations, we must ensure that Commander Cole is found at fault to reassure both allies and domestic audiences that deviation from engagement protocols will be punished swiftly." Daniel's stomach lurched. He had suspected, all these years, that he had been offered up as proof. But seeing it in writing, that was different. It was like hearing a diagnosis rather than guessing from the symptoms. "I'm surprised they wrote it down," he said, voice hoarse. "So am I," Singh said. "Arrogance, perhaps, or just the belief that it would remain buried. There are also indications that exculpatory evidence was downplayed. Reports from your XO at the time about anomalous radar returns. A signal from an Allied asset warning of spoofed AIS tags in the area that never made it into the final summary." Daniel's hands shook under the table. He curled them into fists to hide it. "And why?" he asked carefully. "Are you telling me this now?" "Because yesterday, on the Reagan, when faced with a similar scenario, the chain of command behaved differently," Singh said. "They did not hesitate until they had perfect clarity. They acted to protect lives, even at the risk of later scrutiny. The only substantive difference in their decision-making process was you." "That's not true," Daniel said automatically. "Blake made the call. Hernandez backed it. I just ran my mouth." "You ran it with experience," Singh said. "An experience they should have listened to more carefully a decade ago. Commander Blake wrote in his after-action report that your advice was, and I quote, the critical factor in overcoming my instinct to overcomply with restrictive IOE instilled in us by cases like Commander Cole's. Singh gave a small, wry smile. He has a blunt way with words. Aisha's lips twitched despite the tension. Blake's report is circulating, Singh said. So is the leaked memo. There is a growing consensus that your original board of inquiry may have been influenced by political considerations to an unacceptable degree. Influenced, Daniel repeated. That's a delicate word for fixed. Nothing as crude as that, Singh said. But yes, there were pressures that compromised its fairness. Enough that there is talk of recommending your case be reopened, perhaps even overturned. The words hit Daniel like a sudden change in sea state. I don't understand, he said. Yesterday, I told a captain to shoot at a boat full of people. Some of them are probably dead. And that's what gets me my day in court back. Singh's expression softened. Yesterday, you may have prevented something far worse, he said. The investigation into the small craft is ongoing, but initial reports suggest there were, in fact, improvised explosives on board. Whether their operators were terrorists, extremists, or just dangerously insane thrill-seekers remains to be seen. But the risk was real. Daniel pressed his knuckles against his mouth. You're telling me my redemption story is that I finally pulled the trigger in time, he said. That's grotesque. It's reality, Aisha said quietly. You made a call, and this time, the outcome was different. People are alive who might not be, and that, combined with the newly unearthed documents, is forcing the Navy to confront something it's been dodging for a decade. Daniel looked at her. Did you know about that memo? He asked. No, she said. If I had, I wouldn't have slept at all these last 11 years instead of just most of them. I believe her, Singh said. She's been one of the voices pushing for a review for some time, though she hasn't had evidence like this before. Daniel scrubbed a hand over his face. What happens now? He asked. That depends on you, Singh said. We can't reopen a case without the cooperation of the subject. At least, not easily. We need your testimony, your willingness to endure another round of questions, appeals, media attention. It won't be painless. It wasn't painless the first time, Daniel said. No, Singh agreed. But this time, the wind may be at your back. Liam leaned forward. You have to do it, he blurted. You can't just let them get away with what they did. Daniel stayed at the scratch tabletop. A fight he'd given up on was being pushed back into his hands whether he wanted it or not. What if I say no? He asked. Singh hesitated. Then the Navy will still have to address the systemic issues the Hawthorne case exposed, he said. But your name will remain what it is in the record. The chance to clear it may pass. Public attention is fickle. So I either rip open old wound for a shot at maybe, Daniel summarized, or I stay anonymous in an underpass while they fix the policy with my life still hanging as the bad example. That's one way to put it, Singh said. Here's another, Aisha said. You can keep letting them tell your story for you, or you can tell it yourself. His anger fled. And what exactly is my story, Captain? He snapped. That I got 3 sailors killed? That I drank my career away in a bottle under a bridge? That I froze once and overcompensated later? She didn't flinch. Your story is that you were put in an impossible situation, did the best you could in the moment, and then were abandoned by an institution that should have had your back. Yesterday, you stepped onto a bridge again and used that experience to help someone else face a similar choice. And in the process, you exposed a truth about how we've been doing things. That's not failure, Daniel. That's messy courage. He laughed, the sound rough. That would make a hell of a recruiting poster. I'm not recruiting you, she said. I'm apologizing. In the only way I can, which is to stand next to you if you decide to do this and not look away this time. Silence settled between them, heavy with things unsaid. Finally, Daniel exhaled. Fine, he said. Reopen your damned case. Ask your questions. Just don't expect me to play the penitent. We wouldn't dare, Singh said. The truth, when it came out, was not tidy. This was not a courtroom drama where single smoking gun or email toppled careers. It was a slow, grinding process of hearings and memos, of senior officers being forced to explain why certain intelligence hadn't been shared with the Hawthorne's bridge, why warnings had been buried in inboxes instead of shouted over secure lines. Daniel sat in conference rooms under two bright lights, answering questions he had answered a decade ago. But this time the tone was different. This time, when he said, "We had conflicting indications of hostile intent, and I hesitated because the ROE required a clear act," the lawyers nodded instead of narrowing their eyes. This time, when he said, "If I'd had the intel that was sitting on a desk 3 levels up, I would have made a different call. They had documents to confirm that such intel existed, time-stamped and never transmitted." Journalists dug. Some still tried to paint him as reckless for advising fire on the harbor boat. Others began to ask whether he had been set up as an example, a cautionary tale to keep other captains from sticking their necks out. Aisha coordinated media briefings that she refused to call spin. She insisted on calling them context. Commander Blake, for his part, was unwavering. In every interview, he made a point of saying, "The decision to fire was mine. But I was able to make it quickly and confidently because I had advice from someone who had lived the consequences of hesitation. I won't let the Navy punish him twice for doing his job." On a popular military podcast, a retired admiral surprised everyone by saying, "We messed this one up, folks. We let fear of headlines drive us to treat a complex situation like a simple one. Cole paid for that. We owe him more than a footnote." The leaked memo circulated. So did the footage of the small boat, of the launcher tumbling into the sea. Online, arguments raged. Was Cole a hero belatedly recognized, or a tragic figure whose story warned of the dangers of both action and inaction? Through it all, Daniel felt like he was watching a storm from inside the eye. Calm that didn't feel like peace, just the temporary quiet between walls of fury. The homeless shelter became an unlikely press scrum backdrop. Reporters hung around outside, hoping to catch him on his way in or out. "Do you feel vindicated?" one called out. "No," he said. "You can't vindicate the dead." "Do you regret your actions on the Reagan?" another asked. "I regret that anyone had to get shot at all," he said. "I don't regret that the crew is still alive." "Do you want your command back?" shouted someone from the back. That question he didn't answer. Not then. The official findings took months. Bureaucracies moved at the speed of glacier and disabled hulls. When the envelope finally came, hand-delivered by Singh, Daniel opened it with fingers that refused to stop trembling. The Board of Correction of Naval Records finds that Commander Daniel J. Cole's relief of command and subsequent discharge were materially impacted by incomplete and improperly weighted evidence. He read it twice to make sure he wasn't hallucinating. "Materially impacted," he read aloud. "Is that legal for we screwed you?" "More or less," Singh said. "Keep going. In light of new evidence and the totality of the commander's service, we recommend the following: that the adverse fitness report be amended, that his general discharge be upgraded to honorable, that his rank at retirement be restored to commander, with attendant benefits." His vision blurred. He blinked hard, but the words wavered anyway. "Benefits," he said. The words sounded surreal. "You mean back pay?" Singh said. "Pension, medical, all of it. You'll never be made whole, Mr. Cole. But we can at least stop making you pay every month for decisions that were not fully yours." Daniel sank onto the nearest chair. His legs felt like they'd finally decided to protest the last 11 years. "Do I have to forgive you now?" he asked, voice raw. "No," Singh said. "That's not in the paperwork." Aisha stood in the doorway, watching. He realized, with a jolt, that she was holding her breath. "Well?" she asked. He held up the letter. "Apparently, I'm honorable again." Her shoulders slumped, relief loosening something in her stance that he hadn't realized was clenched. "Good," she said, "because I'm tired of explaining to people that you always were." He looked at her. "So what now?" he asked. "They send me a check, and we call it square." "That depends on you," she said. "The Navy owes you. If you want to walk away, build a life somewhere far from salt water, no one would blame you. If you want to come back in some capacity, there are options." "Come back," he repeated. "I'm in my late 40s, and I've been out of the game for over a decade. You've got a brain full of experience that our current crop of officers clearly needs," she said. "Advisory roles, training, war college lectures. Help us fix the IOE so the next captain doesn't have to choose between the board and the body bags. And what about ships? He couldn't help asking. She hesitated. Active command is unlikely, she said. They would be resentment. Questions. Even with the record corrected, some will always see you as the man who lost the Hawthorne. And to be brutally practical, the promotion pipeline moves on. But billets like senior mentor at tactical training commands, that's not off the table. He absorbed that. Part of him ached at the idea of never again standing in the captain's chair with the deck rumbling under his feet. Another part thought about a classroom where he could look a young officer in the eye and say, "This is what it feels like when the world is on fire and you have 30 seconds to decide. Let's talk about how not to do what I did, and how not to let your fear of what happened to me paralyze you." "Do they want me?" he asked, "because it's the right thing, or because it'll make a good lessons learned slide?" "Both," Aisha said with brutal honesty. "But the slide might save lives. And so might you." He stayed at the letter again. A homeless shelter common room was an odd place for a life pivot. Liam hovered in the doorway, pretending to wipe tables while listening shamelessly. "If I say no," Daniel said slowly, "if I take the pension, get myself an apartment with a real bed, and spend the rest of my days fishing and yelling at cable news, will you leave me alone?" "Yes," Aisha said. "And if I say yes?" "Then we start the paperwork," Singh said, with a weary affection of a man who'd seen too many forms. Daniel sat with it for a long moment. The hum of the shelter's fluorescent lights replaced, in his mind, by the hum of a destroyer's systems. Past and present overlapped. "Can I ask you something first?" he said, looking up at Aisha. "Of course. Why did you really put my name forward for that Fleet Week thing?" he asked. Deep down, not the PR answer. She flinched, just a little, and she seemed to decide something. "Because I was tired of seeing your story end with cardboard under an overpass," she said. "Because I was complicit in your silence, and this was the only way I could think to break it. And because I miss ships too. I thought maybe if I brought you back to one, we could both remember why we started this in the first place." He nodded. It was more vulnerability than he'd expected. "And did you?" he asked. "Remember?" She smiled, small and wry. "When you gave that course order and the bow started to swing?" "Yeah, I remembered." He exhaled. "Me too," he said. Liam could no longer pretend not to listen. "So are you going back?" he blurted. "Like, to the Navy?" Daniel considered the kid, the donated tables, the bulletin board with flyers about housing and addiction counseling. The place that had kept him alive when the Navy, honorable discharge or not, had not. "I can't go back to what I was," he said. "That person's gone. But I can go forward with what I know." He looked at Singh. "You said senior mentor. Training. War college. Is any of that local? I'm not exactly flush for relocation." "We'll make it work," Singh said. "Given the circumstances, I suspect certain doors will open." "Then here's my condition," Daniel said. "If I take this, I get to split my time. Half with your officers, half with guys like the ones in this shelter. You want me to tell stories about command? I'm going to tell them about what happens after, too. About how we take care of people when the war's done. Or don't." Aisha hesitated only a moment. "Deal," she said. Singh raised an eyebrow. "That's above my pay grade," he said dryly. "But I'll pass it along." Loudly. "So," Daniel said, staring down at the letter that changed his status from disposable to officially worth something. "I guess the story is, homeless vet briefly commands destroyer, helps stop an attack, forces Navy to admit it screwed him over, then ends up back in the system he left, yelling at lieutenants and bureaucrats." "It's a little longer than that," Aisha said. "Good," he said. "Short stories never suited me." Months later, in a classroom at the Tactical Training Center, a group of junior officers and senior enlisted from a dozen ships watched a case study projected on the wall. On the screen, a simulation of a destroyer in home waters, a small craft approaching fast, an ambiguous launcher on its bow. Room lights dimmed. They listened to the narrated scenario. Radio calls ignored. Harbor patrol delayed. ROE restrictions conflicting with evolving threat. "In this scenario," said the narrator, The commanding officer must decide whether to authorize disabling fire on a vessel that has not yet exhibited a clear hostile act but displays multiple indicators of possible hostile intent. A hand went up. "So," a young lieutenant said, "what's the right answer?" At the front of the room, Daniel Cole chuckled softly. "If I could give you an answer that fits on a note card, I'd be out of a job," he said. "There isn't a right answer. There's a less bad one you have to live with." The kids shifted in their seats, some anxious, some intrigued. "The question," Daniel continued, "is not just what the ROE says in black and white. It's what you know about the environment, about the intel, about how fast things can change. It's about how you balance the legal risk of acting with the moral risk of not acting." He tapped the screen. "And it's about what happens to you and your crew after the Board of Inquiry, whichever way it goes." On the back wall, a flyer for a veterans housing program fluttered in the breeze from the air conditioner. On Daniel's desk, next to his notes, was a coffee mug from Harbor Hope. "In my first command," he said, "I hesitated and people died. In my second chance, I spoke up and other people lived. In both cases, we paid. We will always pay. Command is about choosing your bill." A young woman in the second row raised a hand. "So," she said, "if you could go back to the Hawthorne, knowing what you know now, would you do it differently?" He paused. The room held its breath. "Yes," he said, "but not because I think I was a coward then or a hero later. Because I know now what I didn't know then. That you will never have all the information you need, and that if you let fear of future blame slow your hand, the ocean will not wait politely for you to finish thinking." He let that sink in. "The truth," he said quietly, "is that the system failed me. It failed my crew. It gave us rules that didn't fit reality and then punished us for not making reality fit the rules. That truth stayed buried for too long. Don't let it happen on your watch." The room was silent. Then an ensign in the back said, "Sir, with respect, why come back? After what they did to you?" Daniel glanced at the window. Beyond it, he could see the glint of sunlight on the harbor, the silhouettes of ships at anchor. The faint, salt-scented breeze curled under the classroom door. "Because," he said, "this is still my Navy. They took my command, not my ownership. And because our people sleeping under bridges who wore this uniform. If I can get even one of you to remember them when you're writing your op orders and your after-action reports, maybe the next Daniel Cole doesn't end up where I did." He smiled, a small, crooked thing. "And because," he added, "no one else was offering me a job where I get to stand in front of a room, tell war stories, and drink Navy coffee without having to stand mid-watch at 3 a.m. Again, the room laughed, tension breaking. They were young. They needed humor as much as doctrine. After class, as they filed out, more than one officer paused to shake his hand. Their grips were firm, their eyes earnest. "Sir, thank you," said one, for coming back." He nodded. "Try not to give me any new case studies," he said. "I'm backed up enough as it is." When the room emptied, Aisha slipped in, leaning against the doorframe. "Nice speech," she said. "Very quotable." "Don't you dare," he said. "I don't want to be a meme." "Too late," she said. "Someone already put command is choosing your bill over a stock photo of a destroyer, and it's all over the internal message boards." He groaned. "God help me." "You did good," she said. "You know that, right? Both times, even when it didn't look like it." He thought about the underpass, the cardboard, the journalistic vultures, the leaked memos, the destroyed small boat, the 3 names he would never forget. "I did my job," he said. "Sometimes badly, sometimes well. The truth is somewhere in between the headlines." She nodded. "We finally wrote some of that truth down," she said, "in places that matter. It's in policy now. Training. Doctrine." He looked around the classroom. On the whiteboard, he'd scribbled, "Rules of engagement are tools, not shackles." "Then maybe it was worth it," he said softly. He walked over to the window. Outside, a destroyer was putting out to sea, tugs pushing her into the channel. For a moment, he imagined he could feel its movement under his feet, phantom deck tilting like a memory. "You ever miss the Che?" Aisha asked quietly. "Every day," he said. You regret not fighting harder for another command. He considered that. Once, the answer would have been an immediate, guttural yes. Now, watching the ship glide away, knowing there was a captain on its bridge making real-time decisions and feeling the weight he knew too well, he felt something else, relief that it wasn't him, and gratitude that he could still contribute without standing in that firing line. I regret that there are people whose names are on a memorial because I didn't know what I know now, he said. But as for the chair, he smiled faintly. I've sat in it twice. That's more than most people ever get. The truth is, maybe I was never meant to die on a bridge. Maybe I was meant to end up in classrooms and shelters, annoying everyone with my opinions. Annoying is one word for it, she said. He grinned. On the harbor, the destroyer's horn sounded as it cleared the channel. Daniel straightened unconsciously, head turning toward the sound like an old war horse hearing the bugle. Godspeed, he murmured, to the ship and the captain he'd never meet. Aisha watched him. We're bringing another group from Harbor Hope next month, she said. Want to come? Talk to them. Show them that homeless and done aren't the same word. He thought of Liam, of the man at the shelter watching news segments with his name scrolling across the bottom, of the quiet nods they'd given him, the way a couple had asked, awkwardly, so, what's a destroyer like? Yeah, he said. Yeah, I do. Good, she said. We'll make sure they let you sit in the chair again. He shook his head. This time, I think I'll stay standing, he said. Let someone else keep the seat warm. He picked up his mug, now emblazoned not just with Harbor Hope's logo but a small, freshly scratched-on crest of the hawthorn. As they left the classroom, Daniel looked back once at the empty rows of chairs. A decade ago, he'd walked away from the only home he knew with his story written by other hands. Now, the narrative had changed, not into a fairy tale, but into something realer, a man broken and rebuilt, who had been both wronged and wrong, both hesitant and decisive, both homeless and, finally, anchored. A homeless war veteran had been allowed to command a Navy destroyer once more. The cameras had rolled, the pundits had shouted, and the Navy had flinched. And then the truth came out. It wasn't neat. It wasn't pure. It didn't erase the past. But it sat there in the record now, stubborn as a ship's wake, refusing to be forgotten. Daniel walked down the hallway beside Aisha, the echo of his steps mingling with the faint hum of a building full of officers learning what it meant to carry lives in their hands. Outside, the harbor glittered. It was, finally, enough.